Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sangeeta Badlani, and I'm the founding member of Nikhil Badlani Foundation, Families for Safe Streets, New Jersey, and Vision Zero New Jersey Alliance. And today, I'm also your host for the session, Safe Mobility for All, Achieving Vision Zero in New Jersey. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping details to share. First, the session is being recorded, and after the summit, the recordings of this and all the other sessions will be made available on the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition website. Second, in order to move today's session along, we would like everyone to use the Q&A function for questions. Because we're covering a lot in today's session, we invite you all to join us for a second session that'll be more of a mixer this afternoon at 5:30 p.m. Registration link will be shared in the chat shortly. When the session ends, you will be prompted to take a short feedback survey. We appreciate you taking the time to fill it out and look forward to your responses. I hope you join us for all our sessions this week. You can still sign up on the Bike and Walk Coalition's registration page at ngbwc.org. In this session, we will talk about why do we need Vision Zero, about the newly formed Vision Zero New Jersey Alliance, the connection between Complete Streets and Vision Zero, a discussion with our experienced panelists, and then we will wrap up the session with what you can do. It was June 11, 2011. It began as just another ordinary day in our lives, but ended as the worst day of our lives. Around 3 p.m., I received a call that my husband and my 11-year-old son were in a car crash. A reckless driver had run a stop sign. It was a 3-car collision involving 4 people. The only one hurt and killed was my son, Nikhil. My youngest son was 6 years old at the time, and his first question to us was, what happened to the driver who killed his brother? Is the driver going to jail? Spoken like an innocent child. Our lives will never be the same. I carry a parent's worst nightmare, the pain and guilt of outliving a child. While Nikhil laid on that hospital bed, I made a promise to him that he would not be yet another statistic and his loss would not be in vain. That's when my journey began to fight the carnage on our roadways. Unfortunately, my story is not too uncommon. Around 600 people die on New Jersey roadways each year. In 2017, we launched the Families for Safe Streets New Jersey chapter for victims and families that have been affected by traffic crashes. Families for Safe Streets New Jersey gives New Jersey residents who have been affected by crashes the opportunity to receive support services, as well as to channel their grief into action. Our goal is to advocate for physical and cultural changes on our roadways through education, legislation, roadway engineering, and enforcement. Each life is precious, and the only acceptable number of traffic deaths is 0. If not 0, then who are we willing to lose? In November, for the World Day of Remembrance, Families for Safe Streets New Jersey and others launched the Vision Zero New Jersey Alliance, which is now a coalition of more than 17 organizations and growing, representing thousands of families, advocates, policymakers, transportation professionals, public health professionals, and others. The Alliance's goal is to push for Vision Zero across the state on all roadways so that every person in New Jersey will be able to travel safely each day without the risk of harm on our roadways, no matter how or when they travel. Our goal is simple. Everyone should be able to leave their house in the morning and return home at night safely. It is astounding that 50% of the fatalities happen on 7% of the roadways which are owned or maintained by the state. To reach Vision Zero, requires that we design safe infrastructure, we put safety before speed, we engage our communities, and use a safe systems approach. Very often we get the question, my town has complete streets policy. How is Vision Zero different? Complete street policies, which are in 169 towns and 8 counties in New Jersey, are a major stepping stone to Vision Zero. These policies change the process of planning streets by providing a framework through which to look at street projects that ensures the street is designed for all modes of mobility. Vision Zero uses data to direct investment to areas where there have been traffic fatalities and serious injuries to stop and prevent them, setting a timeline for zero traffic fatalities and serious injuries. For the Alliance, this goal is 2030. So please remember, the two policies, they work together in tandem to aggressively address unsafe road conditions, creating streets that are compelling, places that support people making sustainable transportation choices. Today, we will be speaking to the following panelists about what Vision Zero looks like in this city. Paul Bellenboyer, co-founder of Safe Streets, Jersey City. Greg Francis, transportation planner, City of Hoboken. Jeffrey Wilkerson, supervising planner, Division of Planning, City of Trenton. Lisa Serioso, chair, Princeton Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. And Jim Hunt, Vision Zero New Jersey Alliance member, 4-foot safe in passing law advocacy leader, will provide the closing remarks. Thank you, Paul, Greg, Jeffrey, Lisa, and Jim for joining us today and for the work you do. So we're going to dive right into our questions for today's session. Some municipalities have been further along than others in adopting Vision Zero. If you can share with us, when did your municipality come to be a Vision Zero city, and how did that happen? What was the catalyst? So Paul, let's start with you first, as Jersey City was the first city to adopt Vision Zero in New Jersey. And you and I go back in 2017 when we met at a first Vision Zero conference in New York City. So Paul, share us your story.
Good morning, and thank you, Sangeeta. Yeah, looking back, it took a surprisingly long time. And really, Vision Zero in Jersey City came about through the working together of several things. First of all, I have to give credit to me and my co-founder of Safe Streets Jersey City and our partner in the campaign, Bike JC. Really, it was the development of community awareness and community interest that was the first key factor in bringing this about. My co-founder, Kara Hrabowski, and I started working on this as a neighborhood issue after a young man in our neighborhood was killed crossing Kennedy Boulevard. And this was late 2013 or early 2014. And we thought that this was a neighborhood issue. There was a particular corner that was unsafe. The road has had a history of problems. But as we delved into it, we started to see that this was a bigger issue, not just about a single road, but one which was important citywide and indeed everywhere. And I'd say that one of the big things we had to do was come to consciousness about the issue. Most Americans are to transportation like a fish is to water. It's all around us. We swim in it every day, but we don't notice it unless something jumps out at us, such as a crash that's close to us or a traffic jam. And as we started to look around, we saw that this was really a problem of inattention. Nobody had seemingly been paying attention to road safety. And we learned through partners, through Transportation Alternatives in New York and others doing the work, that these were all things which could be fixed, and the crash rates and the injury rates and the death rates decreased if we paid some attention to it. So our biggest job was getting attention. We waged a campaign on Kennedy Boulevard to get the county, who was in charge of the road, to step up with some safety improvements. And we found a pretty willing partner there, but we didn't have as much luck with our city. So our biggest job was really to gain public awareness of the campaign. So we engaged in public meetings, first of all, on Kennedy Boulevard to ask for / demand safety changes first on Kennedy Boulevard, and then to call for a Vision Zero effort in Jersey City, a policy which would commit the city to eliminating traffic deaths. We found that this was wildly popular because everybody is a transportation user. And once you start looking at the safety of the roads around you, it's hard not to see that there are problems. We would start meetings simply by asking people's experience in a very simple way, from asking people who'd had a loved one killed or seriously injured to stand and remain standing.
Okay, we'll wait for Paul to come back. Lisa, can you share your experience with us?
Yes, hi. I'm going to put up on the screen a photo, part of a presentation that we gave multiple times in our experience in Princeton. And it's an unsettling photo, and I'm sorry to be bringing this into your vision right at the beginning, but this was a pedestrian fatality that occurred in 2017 with a pedestrian crossing in the crosswalk with the signal that really set a lot of us on a mission that we'd already been talking about, but asking ourselves the question, why isn't Princeton doing more? It happens to be at an intersection in the center of town. It happens to be on a state highway adjacent to, as you can see in the background, a central part of the university campus. And the person that was killed was actually the wife of a visiting professor. So it brings in so many elements of what Princeton is about, which is a state highway, a lot of visitors, the university, and yet still a problem with fatalities in the center of town. So what we ended up doing was approaching in both small meetings and public meetings to address the concern that we had as a committee. Just to introduce myself, I'm the chair of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee, to ask the town, what could we do to make this preventable? And just as Paul was mentioning, as you have mentioned, we want to make sure that everybody in our community leaves home and comes home and where they actually feel safe walking everywhere. And so we began with small meetings, and we began talking to our council members. We talked to the Board of Health. We talked to several other committees about the concept of Vision Zero, and brought it along to the point where we were making full presentations to the the council meetings. And we did experience some questions about why do we need Vision Zero when we already have complete streets? And as you pointed out, Sangeeta, that they are a partnership, but that Vision Zero is about the data and prioritizing the situations where the problems first are obvious in these cases of fatalities and serious injuries.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for sharing. Greg, moving along to you.
Good morning, everyone. In Hoboken in 2010, we passed a complete streets, well, we adopted a complete streets policy. And we also did our bicycle and pedestrian master plan under the leadership of Mayor Dawn Zimmer back in 2010. And over time, we made pretty good progress in improving on-street infrastructure such as bike lanes, curb extensions. But as we all know, pedestrians and bicyclists, pedestrians especially, bear a lot of the brunt of injuries. When we did our initial crash analysis, we found that bicyclists and pedestrians made up less than 10% of all crashes in Hoboken, but made up 40% of the injuries resulting from crashes. So we also saw that our neighbors in New York and Jersey City adopted their Vision Zero policies or Vision Zero initiatives. And so under the leadership of Mayor Bala, in 2019, we started our Vision Zero initiative. So, it was a result of, almost 10 years of using complete streets and making pretty good progress, but realizing that the impact of Vision Zero is systemic. And so we had to bring in several other people who weren't really engaged in the conversation before 2010 or before 2019. And we had a little bit more of an aggressive goal based on this. So our goal is to eliminate all injuries and fatalities resulting from traffic crashes.
Thank you. That's the goal that we all should strive for. And moving right along, Jeff, can you share what's going on in the city of Trenton?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this all started a few years back when we were updating our master planning effort. We were actually doing a master plan redo. And during that first year, which was 2014, we had a huge citywide visioning effort. And during that visioning, we came out of the visioning with a set of guiding principles. And one guiding principle that really stood out was everyone wanted to build a safe city. And so out of that guiding principle came, two other goals that kind of align with that guiding principle. And one was a multimodal transportation goal that really talked about making a safe environment for walking, biking, accessing transit, and sharing the road with motorized vehicles. And then out of those goals, we came up with specific actions. And one action that the community at that time was really adamant about was a Vision Zero policy. And that was primarily because of, it was a buzzword at the time, but also in New York, there was quite a few people in the community who was very familiar with what was happening in New York and wanted to incorporate that in the city of Trenton. So that's how we got to where we are today in regards to the infancy of embarking on a new Vision Zero policy.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Clearly, it's all been motivated by traffic deaths and the serious injuries that we are seeing on our roadways. And so, Paul, I see you're back. So thank you for coming back on. And I know you got cut off, but I was just curious to hear, what were the key turning points in your campaign? At what point did Vision Zero start to look like a feasible path? And how did you end up changing the minds of the officials in your city?
So thank you, and I'm glad to be back. There are really two key turning points. First, and this is one of the unfortunate realities, is that traffic deaths are an occasion where the public's attention turns to our roads. So as an advocate, those are times when we have to step up and to use that to bring about some good from what has happened. We always work with the family members, so we're not going to take advantage of a tragedy like that, except as it's in line with what the family members want. And over again, we hear from the folks most directly impacted that they want positive change to come out of their tragedy. We had 3 deaths in a short period on Kennedy Road, Kennedy Boulevard, one of which was a 10-year-old boy on his way to school. And so we found that getting people would rally around that out of sympathy for the family and recognition that traffic is something which is close to us all. We steadily built our public meetings and always included an educational component so that people would begin to see the traffic issues around them. And in coalition with Bike JC grew steadily larger and until the true turning point, which was the mayoral campaign of 2017. We were the first to plan and announce and schedule a candidates forum for both the mayor and city council candidates. It was the best attended forum of the campaign. And somewhat surprisingly, the turning point was at the forum where the mayor announced his commitment to a Vision Zero policy. Behind the scenes, he had been studying and working with folks in the administration to really understand the issue. And I think there's a recognition that this was doable, that this was popular, but it was also really good policy. So we were a little surprised that the victory came so quickly, but very grateful that both he and the other candidate were totally on board with the Safe Streets idea.
So Paul, looks like it was a combination of your advocacy efforts and, obviously the fatal crashes that were happening on Kennedy Boulevard.
And the policymakers, chiefly the mayor, but working with his planners and other officials to really understand that this was policy which made sense for our city. We looked at the cost of the death and the relatively small costs of implementing Vision Zero, which is largely done when you touch roads with the money you were going to use anyway. So that was the catalyst, was getting an awareness that this was a policy which really made sense and had good and strong public support.
Thank you, Paul. Lisa, do you have anything to add to what's happening in Princeton?
Yes, we actually took a slightly different approach to this result. Our result is actually not an executive order because of the way that Princeton's municipal government is established. As some people in the audience will probably relate to this, not every municipality has the ability in their mayor to write an executive order. And in our case, the council needed to vote on this. So we made presentations, as I was mentioning earlier, to our council, to the Board of Health. And then a very significant step was to make a presentation to a combination of council members, as well as municipal staff, and some community members, including the schools, the universities, and several other groups. And as a result, at that meeting last December, we walked away from that meeting with the recognition that this was a way forward for our town. However, instead of an executive order, it would need to be approved as a resolution to create a task force. And the task force would do the work to propose an action plan that would then be brought back for a vote at the end of this current year by the council and the mayor. So that's how we arrived. That's where our turning point was back in December.
So Lisa, Princeton has not yet adopted a Vision Zero policy, but they may very well be on their way to adopting one soon.
Yes, and I would say that we've got 17 members of the task force that cross through elected officials, municipal staff, community members, and that we have broken the task force into subcommittees to address different policies and metrics, data, as well as education, communication, as Paul was mentioning, how important it is to engage the community and get feedback from the community about where they think there are issues that may not have risen to the surface. And therefore, we can address those in an action plan for the entire community.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Greg, what is the first action that Hoboken took after adopting the Vision Zero policy? Tell us about some of the transformative action that Hoboken has taken.
Well, so our plan, it hasn't been officially adopted yet. We hope that this month we'll be adopting it, but we've already started work on some of our initiatives. Right now, we're doing a citywide speed limit study with the goal of reducing the speed limit across the city. Right now, citywide speed limit is at 25 miles per hour, and we know that drivers typically, if the road is built for a certain speed, they typically drive at that speed or a little bit faster. So right now we're collecting speed data, and we think that due to the fact that speed is a contributing factor to most crashes, and especially crashes that result in injuries, we think that we can get a pretty significant gain in overall safety by reducing the citywide speed limit. That's probably our first action that we're working on right now.
And we know, especially, over the last year, we've seen that speeding seems to be one of the main primary factors for traffic fatalities. Jeff, I know that City of Trenton is still in its infancy stage, but do you have in your mind what is the first action plan that you would like to take?
Well, we out of this effort, we're looking forward to the action plan that will be the result of this planning effort would be to inform our capital improvement plan and actually help put priorities around our capital improvement around pedestrian and bicycle safety and really identifying where in the city we need to focus infrastructure improvements that really help alleviate these what we hope to identify as our high injury network, and then utilize that capital improvement plan to actually move forward and make those improvements. But also we're looking forward to actually not only just making it a capital improvement plan, but making it a 5-year safety plan for streets and pedestrians, and really pulling it out and extracting it as its own plan, and putting a focus on that particular 5-year plan.
So Jeff, does City of Trenton have like a pedestrian committee or something that that has been looking at pedestrian safety in your town?
We have a complete streets committee, so it's really looking at the facilities, but obviously that actually would mean you're looking at safety as well. We're hoping that as we implement these complete streets, that it is helping incorporate more safety for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Thank you, Jeff. Paul, so what has been the toughest pieces to implement in Jersey City? How has Jersey City overcome challenges and roadblocks?
Thank you. So I'm going to mention two things. One is really maintaining public awareness and attention, because this is an important engine of accountability. You know, our planners and road professionals are great, but it really helps to have the tangible voice of the public advocating for specific changes. So when perhaps somewhat controversial plan is proposed, the people turn up to support it because it's a safety improvement for the road.
Mhm.
And then I think the big issue is always speed. We're addicted to speed. If the speed limit is 25, people drive 35. And finding the places where and the ways where we can have road travel in relatively congested city streets, travel ever slower without people getting irate about it, is the number one public acceptance issue.
Yeah, I know it is really hard to, you know, educate the people, but I think with constant messaging, you know, we can definitely raise awareness. And, you know, our neighboring towns have done it, so why can't New Jersey do it, right?
And this is why we loved Vision Zero, because so much of the work happens in design, which is something that people accommodate to. Once it's built into the road infrastructure, we just travel and we tend not to notice that things are different from before. And sometimes even when it's better, we don't notice that either.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Greg, what have been the roadblocks for Hoboken?
For us, you know, since we're early on in the process, it's really just understanding the breadth of, you know, the work in terms of, you know, we have a task force that's a very diverse group of people, includes everyone from, you know, our fire department, our housing authority, the county engineer, and we also have the Board of Education. So people that typically aren't at the table when we're discussing, you know, traffic safety initiatives, and really just reminding people that, you know, there's action items in our action plan that that you can take when you're, you know, upgrading your fleet vehicles or doing, you know, things that you typically wouldn't pay close attention to Vision Zero or street safety, that are there in the toolbox. And I think right now we're still coming up with a strategy for, I guess, engaging these people to help us reach our goal in 2030.
So have the residents, Hoboken residents, embraced Vision Zero? You know, what are you hearing?
Maybe unsurprisingly, most residents of Hoboken are proponents of Vision Zero. They've been advocating for Vision Zero. It's a very small, dense city where everyone's a pedestrian. People take transit, people bike. So people understand, you know, what Vision Zero is, and they also understand the, you know, the significance of safety countermeasures like curb extensions. So I think people really, they're demanding a high level of, you know, competency here, and they want us to make sure that that we're moving along with Vision Zero. So I think the residents are generally very supportive. You know, ultimately, we may get some resistance when we have to, you know, decide some trade-offs when we're redesigning a street, or you know, an education campaign may not reach a certain audience. So those are things that we may encounter down the road that we'll have to take into consideration.
Right, but safety, you know, trumps over
Safety's,
everything.
yeah, and see, and Hoboken's residents in general, I think, you know, overwhelmingly support safety, as most people, I'm sure, in New Jersey do.
Yes, I think we are changing. We are changing that behavior and the mindset of the people. So thank you. Now this, I want to open this question up to all of you. We know many initiatives, they get dropped due to lack of funding. So how did your municipality raise the funds needed to create a Vision Zero action plan and implement it? So let's start with you, Greg. Let's continue with you.
So in the past, when we've done our roadway resurfacing program, which most communities in New Jersey receive funding for, we've really taken it, we've turned it into a complete streets program. And that's gotten us to the point where almost half of our overall street miles have a bike lane or protected bike lane. We do curb extensions, you know, where we can. We daylight intersections. But you know, the scope of Vision Zero goes beyond just street redesigns. And so right now it's just, like I said before, educating different stakeholders about what they can include in their budgets, or when they're applying for grants, how to include these different Vision Zero action items, whether you're a fire department buying new vehicles, making sure that you take into account safety features, to the Board of Education doing safety education for students and also for parents about distracted driving and different things related to that.
So Greg, did the city of Hoboken receive any federal funding at all to support the Vision Zero efforts?
We haven't
From the
received.
state?
Well, we do receive funding from the state from NJDOT to do roadway resurfacing. We recently received a bikeways grant. So these are different infrastructure projects. I believe our police department also receives funding for distracted driving campaigns, and I know they do pedestrian decoy campaigns. So I think there are several funding channels that we're already using to get to our Vision Zero goal, but we haven't received any federal funding specifically for Vision Zero, or state funding for that matter, which would be a great thing if we could have that at some point.
Right, and that is something that the Vision Zero New Jersey Alliance is working on. Lisa, how is Princeton funding their task force?
Right now, it is completely volunteer, and there's no specific funding that's been sought or a consultant that's been brought in. We're working with the data and the information and knowledge that we have organically, if you will. And at some point, we may refer to some consultant techniques, but we have, over the last several years, done many projects and studies, including our bike master plan, a recent corridor study for a east-west route that could very likely become bike lanes. We've done other studies as far as parking, and we're working with what we have already. And if there was funding available, I'm sure we'd be very interested. But our general policy with the improvements on the bike master plan have been to address pieces of the plan as we are resurfacing the roads.
Thank you, Lisa. Paul, can you share how Jersey City is doing it?
Yes. So first of all, the funds to develop our Vision Zero action plan were committed from the city budget because this was seen as an important priority for the city and the administration. And that focused really on development of a high injury network. So really mapping where the crashes take place, and more importantly, where the serious injuries and fatalities take place, because those are the places that obviously need the most attention. Since then, our pros like Greg and Jeffrey, money is part of the work of transportation. So you look for the funds anywhere you can get them, and usually existing funding sources are totally amenable to Vision Zero work, as long as you do your design with an eye towards safety and the Vision Zero principles. The one thing that we could really use more of is the state involvement in two ways. A state commitment to Vision Zero would, the state roads in Jersey City are the roads we really can't touch, and those are some of the deadliest. But also, if the state were to commit funding in terms of prioritizing funding projects based on their adoption of Vision Zero principles, something beyond just checking the box to say, yeah, we have a policy, but the projects we're submitting conform to Vision Zero and improve safety in specific ways, that would be a big help, and that would help other communities rush to make changes, because our actions follow the funding.
Thank you, Paul. I agree. I mean, we definitely need to see an engagement at the state level. Jeff, I know Trenton is, again, looking for some creative ways of funding. I remember speaking to you about this, but I'd like for you to share it with the audience.
Yeah, like Paul mentioned, we're looking for funding where we can get it. And one way we were able to provide or access technical assistance to actually develop the action plan was through our Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. And I believe the way we were able to do that is the fact that, Vision Zero policy was stated in our master plan, which indicates the city wants to support that. The MPO was willing to actually take this on as their planning work program and provide that technical assistance to the city. And we're also, in the meantime, we're actually doing some pedestrian bicycle safety designs for different intersections and corridors throughout the city, specifically around our train station area. We're looking at 7 intersections and that interlink with each other around the train station area, where for access to the train station and through the train station area, and improving pedestrian and bicycle safety measures throughout that whole area around the train station. Then we're also looking at our Perry Street corridor, which is a major corridor within the city that really links our east side and west side of the Route 1, US Route 1, that kind of like bifurcates the city. But this was a corridor that really needs some pedestrian and safety improvements. So we've been doing some design work with NJDOT and their technical assistance. I think it's the local planning pedestrian and bicycle safety grant or something to that measure. But I failed to mention the funding we got through for the train station area was through, again, DVRPC, their local concept development. So we were actually to get some grant funds to come up with the design for those infrastructure improvements. Those intersection improvements.
So here from all of you, it seems like, funding is there. There is city funding available. There are grants that one can seek. And, also, Jeff, like you shared, you're getting some support from MPO also. So there are definitely different resources available out there, but we just have to find the will to do it. That's what it comes down to. So thank you. And so now we're going to go dive right into the questions that we have from the audience. So let's start with them. And, we are, again, we have 15 minutes until our session is over. So the first question that I have is, what does passing a Vision Zero ordinance require the city or town to do to reach the goal of zero? We see towns passing complete streets ordinances and then never following through with the complete streets improvements. So does anyone want to take it? Just raise your hand so I can call on you.
I'll say real quick, we haven't passed an ordinance related to Vision Zero. We have an executive order, but I would, before you pass an ordinance, I would look at the crash data for your community and see really what's causing injuries and deaths, and see how, I guess, the breadth of the campaign that you need. Do you need to engage with people that aren't typically involved in discussions about traffic safety and roadway redesigns? And then, like what Lisa encountered, every community in New Jersey is different in terms of their governing structure. So for us, it didn't make sense to do an ordinance at this point.
Lisa, I saw that you had raised your hand. Would you like to add to that?
What I would add is that an ordinance, in our experience, requires first an introduction and then a 2-week or sometimes a 3-week period before it returns to council for a public comment. And at that time, the public attending the council meeting can then express their concerns directly in the meeting to the council members before they vote on the ordinance. So I would propose that in Vision Zero, being a systematic and data-driven approach, that wherever a town or community is considering Vision Zero, that you make sure that the ordinance upholds those basic parameters of Vision Zero, and therefore the town and the staff and the community as a whole are committed to it and embrace the whole concept.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that, like I mentioned before, how we want to utilize our action plan that identifies the various infrastructure issues that may be causing these high injuries to happen at different areas throughout the city. We're really looking to incorporate that into the capital improvement plan and prioritize it that way, so that the infrastructure improvements are, not necessarily just cited within the action plan and as something that we'd like to achieve, but is actually incorporated into a working document that the city should be taken into consideration for their budgeting.
Paul, did you want to add to it?
Just really simply, I'm going to put a lot of this on us, meaning the community of people who care about this issue. The public officials respond to public interest. So showing up for meetings, continuing to raise the issue that this is important and urgent is, I think, the best accountability method, because generally speaking, the folks that are doing the work want to see this happen as well, but they need sometimes a push and to know that somebody in the community has their back if they're going to try and take away a parking spot or two.
Thank you, Paul. Our next question is, are there speed limit recommendations based on street size, downsize, etc., either by DOT or some other entity? So I know, Greg, you were talking about that, looking at the speed limits and reducing the speed limits is one of the first actions that you're doing in City of Hoboken. So you want to take this question?
Yeah, so we've been a member of, the City of Hoboken has been a member of NACTO, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. And they have, last summer, they released a document, I think it was called City Limits, that provides pretty helpful guidance on, I guess, determining the proper speed limit, both the posted speed and the design speed for streets. And we rely on NACTO resources and guidance. We've been relying on it since the organization was founded. We were one of the founding members. And I would suggest that whoever is asking the question to look at that document.
Thank you, Greg. Lisa, do you know if Princeton has been looking at any data on speed?
As a matter of fact, several areas in our town have reduced their speed, have had reductions in the speed limit from 25 to 20. There's another one in the works that's reducing from 35 to 30. And I believe there's another one from 30 to 25. These are all working through the ordinance process. And in one particular case, it was based on the comments of the neighborhood. And in another, it's in anticipation of a development of density housing that really will need to have a slower speed limit. So there are measures being taken, and I would also point out that if we see some changes in the way that the MUTCD approaches the 85th percentile speed limit design concept, that would be a huge step forward.
Thank you, Lisa. So our next question is, it is extremely relevant too, because Vision Zero is, a data approach. So how do you incorporate the experience of many people who have had near misses or feel unsafe on certain streets in the data collection work for Vision Zero?
One thing we did while we were, when we were doing our public outreach for our Vision Zero action plan, we did a 5-year crash analysis. And that was obviously the data that exists on crashes that have occurred. But to get to, the perception of safety or close calls, we had an interactive map, a wiki map that people could use and drop a pin and indicate the mode and explain a little bit about the safety issues that they encountered there. But that was just during our action planning process. So we really, moving forward, I think we need to do more of this investigation, determining, where people feel unsafe or have had close calls that aren't really included in the crash data.
Thanks, Greg. Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
Jersey City followed a similar process with, public comment and reception as the plan was under development. And I think this goes back to really squeaky wheel approach. So if you have an unsafe condition, raise it to the attention of your city or county or whoever's in charge of the road, because that helps people take a closer look at the data and prioritize work, because sometimes there are easy wins and we love those.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Our next question is it important to establish short, medium, and long-term objectives? Jeff, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I would think so. Especially, I guess it depends on cost, especially if you want to allocate funding for projects that may take 2 to 3 years for that funding to be realized. So that, or even longer, sorry. That's why I think that you should have short, medium, and long-term objectives. Add some reality to those objectives.
Right. And, I keep hearing like sometimes there's these low-hanging fruits that you can address right away with very little outlay, and so those are some of the things that fall under your short objectives, and one can address those. And then you look at some that will take longer. So I think just like any project, you need to have short, medium, and long objectives. So with that was our final question. And if you have more questions over there, again, I want to remind you, please join us today at 5:30 for the mixer, where we'll have a more interactive discussion, and we'd like to hear from you. And so now we're almost getting to the top of the hour, and I'd like to invite Jim Hunt to wrap up the session. Jim is again, has a success story to share with us today. And so Jim, over to you now.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you to all the panelists this morning, and thanks to all of you who have joined this session to learn about Vision Zero. I was just thinking as I listened to all the comments and your questions, Vision Zero in many ways is a puzzle that every town has to figure out for itself. But one of the important things that Vision Zero does is to offer a frame for that puzzle, a way to unite all the different pieces that come together in order to form a roadway that's safe for everybody, where there are no serious injuries or deaths over time. That's the goal that we have. Vision Zero is that goal that we can accomplish if we work to put the puzzle together for ourselves. And we vitally need the state to fill in some of the pieces of that puzzle. But in terms of what you can do right after this, I think one of the things that's important to do is to share the vision of zero deaths and serious injuries with your friends and family. Start small, share the vision. As Sangeeta said at the outset, if the question is, how many can we afford to lose? And your answer is nobody, then get started by talking to your family and your friends. But then the puzzle pieces are important, whether it might be a state policy or the success that was just referenced that we can mention. We have been working for many years through the Bike and Walk Coalition to establish a safe passing law for all road users that are not in cars and trucks for the state of New Jersey. About 2 weeks ago, the Senate Law and Public Safety Committee released the bill from the Senate. Yesterday, the Assembly released the bill from the Assembly Law and Public Safety Committee. We're now going to work on our efforts to get it to the floor, to get it passed, to get it in law by this summer. It's another one of those puzzle pieces that will help us get to Vision Zero. Certainly, there are many other puzzle pieces. Many of us want to work on those things in the towns. The complete streets policies are essential. All those puzzle pieces can help us do it. But we do need the state support, whether it's the safe passing law or the other ways in which the state can support us. I think it's also important that in the action stage that we continue to build the number of advocates. As Paul said, we have to keep the pressure on as advocates. And so the easy way to do that, at least, is to join the Vision Zero New Jersey Alliance. We have a pledge you can take, and I think we may have a link coming up, I hope, or if not, we'll send it to you, so that you can sign the pledge, join the Vision Zero Alliance, share the news with your vision of your embracing the vision with your family and friends, support the puzzle pieces, the building blocks that lead us to Vision Zero, and answer your questions by coming to the Mixer this afternoon, checking out the Vision Zero New Jersey Alliance website and all the resources that are available. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this morning. We appreciate the time and look forward to talking to you later at the Mixer.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you to our panelists, Greg, Jeffrey, Paul, Lisa. Your experiences are definitely going to help set the path for other municipalities in New Jersey. And with your help, then we can lean on the state of New Jersey to adopt Vision Zero as a policy. Again, like Jim said, please join us at the Mixer. We want to have some interactive discussions with you all. So we hope to see you then. Again, stay on. We have a short survey. Please provide your feedback, and we look forward to your responses. And everybody, thank you and have a great day.